Hi, I'm Donald Sinclair. I'm a science teacher with Great London Tutors, and today we're going to be looking at a few topics in chemistry. This is how to identify acid reactions. It's useful to be able to identify individual acids. I've put the formulae for three of the most common ones on the board here: sulfuric, nitric and hydrochloric acid. The main thing to remember is that the chemical formula for an acid will always contain hydrogen or multiple units of hydrogen somewhere in the formula. So for example, sulfuric acid is simply a sulfate group attached to two hydrogens. Similarly, nitric acid is nitrate plus a hydrogen. Hydrochloric is chlorine plus a hydrogen. If something has a hydroxide group as opposed to hydrogen, that does not mean it's an acid. Quite the opposite, it means it's a base. So having identified the acids, we can look at some simple acid reactions. Acids react with metals or bases to form salts and other materials as well, depending on what it is they're reacting with. So for example, an acid and a metal is very simple. It produces a salt plus hydrogen gas. So for example, hydrochloric acid will react with magnesium to form a salt called magnesium chloride, as well as hydrogen gas. When you're naming the salt, it's very easy. Just remember that a salt will always be a metal bonded with a non-metal. So the metal will always be from the metal, obviously. The non-metal will come from the name of the acid. If it's hydrochloric acid, it'll be something chloride. If this reaction had sulfuric acid instead, for example, it would be magnesium sulfate instead, and so on and so forth. Acids can also react with bases. For example, oxides or hydroxides will react with acid to form a salt plus water. We have water now instead of hydrogen because of the presence of oxygen. So for example, sulfuric acid will react with copper oxide. That will produce a salt. Again, we get the name of the salt from the compounds involved. The metal comes from the oxide, in this case, copper, and the non-metal in the salt comes from the acid. Sulfuric acid gives us copper sulfate plus water. This was hydrochloric acid involved in this. Copper chloride would be the name of the salt in the end. And finally, one extra case is when an acid reacts with a carbonate. In this case, it's exactly the same as an oxide or hydroxide, but because of the presence of carbon, we also get carbon dioxide as one of our products. So for example, hydrochloric acid will react with calcium carbonate to give the salt, which is calcium chloride, plus water, plus carbon dioxide.